This podcast sheds light on the incredible stories of those who served and are now navigating civilian life. Join me as we explore the challenges, triumphs, and unique perspectives of transitioning veterans. From career shifts to mental health, we cover everything. Subscribe now and amplify the voices of our heroes. Amplify Veterans, where every story matters. This is another episode of Amplify Veterans. I'm here today with Kevin Haggerty. Kevin spent 26 years in the Navy, retired as a lieutenant commander. He is now the owner, CEO, founder of Lighthouse Health. Lighthouse Health is a holistic, natural approach to health and wellness. And with that said, I'll let you go into some of your highlights about your background and what you're currently doing with your business.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me, Nick. Appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, 26 years in the Navy. I initially started right out of high school. My first job in the Navy was as a nuclear plant operator. So I went through 2 years of training to learn how to operate and maintain nuclear power plants. Served on a cruiser for 3 years, and that was an interesting time. That was actually back in the early to mid 80s. So world was a different time, different place. Got to travel and see a lot. Went through both the Panama and the Suez Canal and a lot of ports. So a lot of great memories of that time. Um, After 3 years on the ship, I was transferred back to Prototype to be an instructor at one of our training facilities, and then separated from active duty and went back to school, got my degree, got a job, many of those things, and then joined the Navy again later, um, post 9/11. So I swore in, joined the Navy on September 27th, 2001. We were in a crisis, and I knew I could offer something to support. So I came back in as an intelligence analyst. So I was enlisted at the time and served as an intel analyst, became a chief petty officer, and then opportunity came to commission. So I got my commission and served the remaining little over a decade as an officer and left as a lieutenant commander.
Wow.
So
That is quite a journey of this and that. And you went to, you mentioned Prototype. I know that's a term for nuclear power training. I know that's part of the end of Navy nuclear power training right before going to your command. And so you went there as an instructor.
correct, yes.
And you also mentioned that that you were on a cruiser. And I think some people don't realize that at the time the Navy was nuclear powered across submarines, cruisers, and also aircraft carriers. Were there any other ships
No,
that were nuke? Okay. And I don't know if you would know this now, but I've heard that, at least in the past, I've heard that they were considering bringing cruisers back to nuclear. Is that a thing?
it. I don't think there's any traction gaining on that, but there has been from time to time talk, and it's the age old thing. It was an interesting time. There were probably 10 or more cruisers at the time, and that was great duty because you got kind of the small ship experience. Now, if you're going to be a nuclear operator on the surface, it's the huge carrier. But they, it was a surprise when they chose to decommission all of them. And a lot of it was back to dollars and cents, that maintaining a dual reactor ship, all the training that you would go through to have a crew to maintain that, was way more than the gas turbine ships. They could have a crew of 100, get the gas turbine lit off and underway quickly. Nuke plant, quite a few more operators and time to get underway.
That makes sense. That's wow. It is interesting. I was on a submarine, so I know the small ship life. I don't know the surface life, but it sounds like the cruiser was a hybrid of that, where, like you said, you only have the option of going surface on an aircraft carrier, and you've got to be one of like 5,000 people on a big floating city versus being able to be in a much smaller, tight knit crew.
Yes, we had a crew of about 500, so pretty large, but still
Still
small
big.
enough you could get to know a lot of people,
Yeah. That's
as
about four to
opposed
five
to.
times the size of a submarine. So that's still pretty big in
But
comparison.
yes,
And yeah, you can have a lot better, closer relationships with your shipmates. And speaking of that, obviously being enlisted and then working your way up to eventually chief petty officer, commissioning. What was that like going from enlisted to officer, having experienced both sides?
that anyone who you talk to will have a similar story. It's difficult. Not only do you get the joy of basically doing uh, boot camp, officer candidate school twice, but the transition, just the way the military structure is, even though you have 10 years experience and all this military experience, in the end, you're still an ensign or first lieutenant, and they treat you like you don't know anything. And so that is the difficult transition,
Mm,
is standing there having a senior enlisted tell you what to do when chances are you might know as much or more than them. But it's it's the process, and it took a couple of years to really kind of work through for me. I had lots of periods of frustration because I knew I could do more, and they kept giving me the typical ensign jobs and duties that were way beneath what I could do and what I had done. But it's part of the military structure. They don't really know what to do, and it's hard to integrate you beyond the normal, ensign, lieutenant JG, lieutenant flow.
that's that's very interesting because you're right. You obviously had a lot of experience as a senior leader prior to making that move, and then you were treated more like a junior officer all of a sudden. It kind of reminds me of this is completely different, in no way the same, but you'll get this when I explain it. Over the weekend, the Broncos destroyed the Cleveland Browns. The Browns looked terrible. They looked like garbage. Russell Wilson, quarterback of the Broncos, looked really well. He was a Super Bowl winner with the Seahawks. He had obviously a great career when he was with Seattle. Moves over then to the Broncos. Had a little bit of a rough patch early on once he got there. And now the Broncos are doing exceptionally well past 5, 6 games. And Russell's doing really well. He's right back to where he was that moment when he was with Seattle. But he said you can't be a mountain hopper. You can't go from the high point of one mountain and then jump to the high point of another. You've got to climb down the mountain, climb back up the next mountain to get to the top again. And that is a hard story. It's a hard lesson for anyone to take, especially when you're used to being up here and then all of a sudden you're back on the bottom of the mountain again.
That's an interesting point, and very well said, because I think it's so true that we often think that we can just move from one high point to another, and even changing teams. You know, Russell Wilson with that, but if you in your civilian job are doing well and knocking it out of the park, and then you choose to change companies, whole new environment. And I've experienced that as well. Changing jobs, whole new environment. They don't know you. You don't know their culture, how they do things. And it's kind of like you got to sit on your hands for a little bit of time to learn and assimilate with that new organization.
Yeah,
So,
new organization, maybe even a new industry. I left. I was in manufacturing sales and went into financial services. Did really well in manufacturing sales, and I was expecting to just be at the top of my game in financial services right out the gate. And wow, super naive at the time, but it's
sure.
not an easy transition when you make a change. Not always an easy transition. So, but very, very interesting. I never thought about that, making the move. I just always assumed that you'd continue to get the respect that you had when you were senior enlisted. You've just made the move over to officer, but not everybody necessarily realizes that or can treat you that way. So, wow. As you as you've then been out for 4 years at this point, you finished as a lieutenant commander. How has the transition been for you since getting out of the military and what you're up to at this point?
Sure. So transition, is kind of interesting. I look at there was kind of two transitions. So the initial, when I got off active duty back in 1989, and that's more of a real transition. I left active duty military and 100% in the civilian world. That was a difficult transition. Leaving when I retired from the reserves was, you know, minimal transition issue, because as a reservist, you do a weekend a month, a couple weeks a year, sometimes more, and you have another job, another civilian job that's paying your mortgage. So, you quit the reserves and you go into work Monday the same as you always do. So
No, that's
the
a good point.
trans,
That's a
the,
good point. You had already made that major transition in the beginning, and then you moved on to your civilian career as well. So that's yeah, I get that.
but there is still a transition, because you serve, you get in this rhythm of going to drill every month, seeing the guys and the women that you serve with, the mission that you're supporting, and the camaraderie and just everything that goes into that. It becomes a part of you, not 24/7 like active duty, but it's a hat you wear that you really feel. So, when the first month comes after you retire from the reserves and the drill weekend comes up, you pause and it's like, wow, no drill. And so there is a transition of kind of identifying and separating from what you knew and did.
That was a part of you that was lost. That obviously you've you're no longer drilling. You're no longer with your people, with your camaraderie. So I can imagine that's not easy to do.
It's a transition, and you think back on it, but over time it gets better. And that's similar when I left active duty, transitioning, that loss of connection, loss of purpose. In the military, we always had a mission, that we connected with, the camaraderie of those we served with, and it's just different in the civilian world. That's part of what drew me back into the reserves is, um, that connection, the mission, a focus, and a group of people that had shared experiences. Sharing a cube with someone in an office, it just isn't the same.
That's right. Yeah, it's different. So tell me a little bit about that then. How have things been? Obviously, you're working on your business now, but how were things as a civilian leaving and transitioning the first time? How was that navigating your civilian career through the reserves and up to where you are now?
Well, initially, when I left active duty, I used my GI benefits to go back to school. So that was an interesting transition as well. So here I am, 26, 27 years old, have had a lot of responsibility operating a nuclear power plant, um, literally traveling around the world. And now I'm in school and I'm watching, observing, and interacting with the typical 18, 19, 20-year old and the fabulous maturity that they display and study skills and work ethic. It was a bit difficult finding and having a sense of peers because I just didn't relate and connect with the kids, even though I was only maybe 6 years older. But there was just so much of a difference.
Big experience gap. Definitely nice to be able to connect with other veteran scholars as well. I think that's something that I've noticed a lot in campuses, that they're putting together better groups for veteran scholars so they can have more of a similar community, that not just the obviously the kids coming right out of high school going right into college. That's obviously a different community, like you're saying. That's it'd be tough to connect and get around without your people, without those veterans also there with you. So that's
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. And back then, there were obviously veterans who had benefits who went, but there just wasn't as much of a connection as now. A couple weekends ago, I was over to a college near me and interacting with the student veterans group. The American Legion and VFW that I'm a part of helped sponsor a gaming day to connect with the students. And I don't game, but it was a way to connect with the younger veterans and support them. And so we had a Saturday afternoon. We set up a bunch of TVs and had some competition amongst everyone who wanted to join in.
That's
So
awesome. I'm a gamer. I haven't played games in a long time, but that's cool that you got to be a part of that. Did you play anything?
I did, but I lost pretty quickly.
Yeah. Oh, it's a games are a different thing now. So
Oh yeah.
I'm not super. My son beats me in Fortnite all the time and all these shooter games, but that's pretty cool that you guys did that. And yeah, tell me a little bit about how things are going with Lighthouse Health.
Sure. So Lighthouse Health is a organization we started to help meet needs, and it really grew out of my and my wife's experience. Like many veterans, as you pass into this civilian world, things change. Family, work, other priorities squeeze your time, and exercise isn't a part of your day like it was in the military. So you find yourself putting on a little bit of extra weight, feeling sluggish and fatigue or low energy, and and then for me personally, add to that, I had an injury in the Navy and had two knee surgeries and have compression in my lower vertebrae in my back. So exercise wasn't without some level of pain. And so there was that as my background. And then my dad actually passed away from a heart attack when he was 42 years old. So I always had that in the back of my mind. I'm the younger of all my siblings. So kind of growing up and observing, as I move into my 20s and 30s, observing them with health challenges, cholesterol. So I knew I would eventually have to reconcile this. And so that was kind of the genesis of how we started Lighthouse Health is a, a need to address my health issues. I wanted to be able to be around for my daughter's weddings, my grandkids eventually. And um, so I started looking into how to be more healthy, how to fit it into my lifestyle with diet and exercise. And then, my wife had a number of health challenges as well. And so just did a lot of study. I'm not a doctor, I'm not a nutritionist, but there's so much information available on the internet. PubMed, NIH puts out so much information. Even Cleveland clinics, and I just subscribed recently to some reports that come out of Harvard Health um, as well. So much information. So we started reading, talking to nutritionists, naturopaths to learn how to improve my health and my wife's health. And, I was able to lose weight, get back into shape, start exercising more regularly. And, the pains and aches of those surgeries, eventually you get past that, kind of a hardening of your will of your body, do more core strengthening. So now my back doesn't hurt, start off with, walking, slow jogging. I stuck with a treadmill initially, so I wasn't pounding on the pavement. And your body, it was amazing. I found how my body adjusted when I started fueling it for success. And, my wife as well, she was able to shed 7 daily medicines that she was told she'd take forever
Wow.
after roughly 6 months of, lifestyle changes, diet, nutrition. So with that, we thought, you know, we experienced quite a change. And so we thought, this is information that's free that we learned. We should help others. So it was born out of that. And, over the last decade, initially things were more slower because I was working full time and not doing this as a business per se, but kind of more of a hobby avocation. But continue to learn more and find ways to offer, holistic, natural approaches to health and wellness for issues like quality of sleep and hydration, exercise, movement, balanced diet, and nutrition. There's just a lot of things available that people don't think about.
That's true. And how do you work with your clients then? What are the ways that you work with the people that you help?
Well, either if they're local one on one, and I've been working to expand reach on social media, so a lot more Zoom calls, Zoom meetings in order to help address, hear from the client what their issues are, because it's all solution based with what's the issue, what's the concern, what's the problem they're facing, and what changes and modifications can we offer to move them down the road. So, the name of the company, Lighthouse Health, is really all about that. Obviously, I love the Navy and everything nautical. So, lighthouses, guiding the ship to safely into port, that became kind of the process and thought of what we would do is, be a guiding light, helping draw people to shore, so to speak, with their health journey. We don't have all the answers, but we can point you in a direction, and what you do is going to depend on your outcome.
That's helpful. I think I can think of a guide that I used to have in my nightstand that it wasn't like a WebMD, but it was like just a guide of things that I could read if I was starting to have some kind of symptom or just some little things that I could look at, and it would give me enough of a enough guidance to say, do I need to go to the doctor or not? And I think that it seems like what you're providing can help people determine that on some level, because you obviously are going to help to work with the client on what those problems are. Maybe they've already got some kind of diagnosis, but maybe they haven't. So you can encourage them to go see medical help if it's something that you can't help them with. But if it's something in your wheelhouse, that's something that you can tackle together with the client and figure out if it's something that you guys can work on before going to that next level and going to see a doctor.
Definitely, because there's so much that we can do. There's this. I think the tide is shifting. There was a phase, where we felt doctors knew everything, and a doctor or prescription would take care of whatever was ailing us. And I think people are waking up more to understanding that there's so much, our bodies are so complex. Doctors really can't know everything. And that we have to be a partner in our own health, and that there's a lot of things that are available to us if we knew, if we knew what it was. But you're competing against big pharma, who has an agenda to sell prescriptions. I personally think one of the worst things that's happened, who knows, maybe it's 15, 20 years ago now, when they were pharmaceutical companies were allowed to market directly to consumers. So you see this stuff, advertisements on your TV. If you're experiencing this or that, this drug might be, and then it quickly lists all the negative side effects you could have. But there's solutions that you can have without prescriptions. There's so much research that's been done and shown cardiovascular issues. What was one of the things that pushed me, that 95%, Dr. Dean Ornish has done piles of research over the last probably 20 years and has his own clinic. And he's been able to show that 95% of the people can prevent cardiovascular with diet and lifestyle. So the vast majority of it. And we see the, kind of this globalization as the Western diet makes its way across the world. And so interesting things start popping up. In Asia, what was a healthy, region of the world, in one generation, they've gone from the lowest incidence to very high rates of chronic disease. We've exported Big Macs, and it has an effect. And it's interesting, you see this in Africa. Cardiovascular deaths in some countries are equal or surpassing HIV/AIDS. How is that? It's preventable.
Totally preventable. You're right. I mean, it's I'd say the majority of the problems that I've experienced in my life are simply just from not getting enough exercise or not eating right. And I think a lot of people can echo that. And those are some helpful things to have a coach for. I think it's difficult when you're busy and you're trying to figure everything out, from how to get to work, how to get the kids to school, how to get them to soccer, and how to just do all the things you have to do throughout the day. It's very difficult to think about how to eat right. But if you have a coach, somebody that can help you put together a good plan, somebody to help you put together a good plan for your workouts, and among other things, it sounds like those are the types of things that you can help people with as well.
Yes, and share information and encouragement to continue on their journey. Sometimes you need the motivation. Why am I doing this? And, knowing that it has an effect on your health. And then when you start feeling it, you start owning it more.
It's good to have somebody that you can connect with and keep you in the game, keep you moving forward and improving. And that's what are you currently working on with the business? I guess what's the next step for you with the business? I know it's kind of is it a newer thing for you to be more full time with it at this point? How long have you been full time on the business?
Started first of this year. So this is my first year in full time.
Okay.
And so do a number of things, run Facebook challenge groups. And so we just last week before Thanksgiving had a 1 week Eat the Rainbow challenge, we call it.
Oh wow.
And
Yeah. What's
and
that?
it's all about encouraging eating a plate full of colorful fruits and vegetables. So you eat through the rainbow, the reds, the orange, the blues, the greens. And so each day would post information about a color. So each day was a color. What were the types of fruits and vegetables in that color? What were the various micro, macronutrients, phytonutrients that those different things provide? And encourage people to share recipes or things they're doing to incorporate that color fruit into their diet, share recipes, and then have daily drawings. So,
It's awesome.
um,
What what types of drawings or what types of things can you win from these competitions?
well, the daily drawings was encouraging, continued interaction. So we had a daily tracker that allowed you to track, am I getting the various colors? And if you snap a picture and post that you did the tracker, you were in the drawing. So pretty
That's cool.
simple.
I love that.
And and we weren't looking for perfection, just progress. So if you only marked off that you had 3 of the 5 colors for the day, that's okay because you posted and you're engaged. And the next day maybe you'll get 4. So it's all about progress, not perfection.
I
And
love
then
the
the
interaction
drawing,
there too. And I like how everybody's coming together to do this as a community
yes.
and they're building each other up. They're probably cheering each other on. How do people find you on social media and also your website?
Well, I am regularly on social media and doing posts. So people will find me through the reels and stories I do, hashtags on various health, nutrition, weight loss, whatever the post is. And then, I market through those and throughout my community as well, networking events and um, word of mouth. So,
We're gonna make sure that we put your website slash social media information in the notes of the show so
all
that
right.
people know how to find you as well, so they can just click on it. And I know we're right up on time here. The last question that I had for you, and before we get to that, want to make sure, was there anything else you wanted to make sure we covered today before I ask you that final question?
Sure. So, I guess the other thing with the veterans and the business and what we do, it's just helping fellow veterans who are struggling with energy or fatigue to awaken the warrior within. We've all had that in our past. So, how to reawaken that so that you can do the things you used to love and enjoy doing. I have a goal to reach 5,000 veterans, help improve 5,000 veterans' health over the next 5 years. And to do that, I'm continuing to reach out and connect with veterans groups in my area and through this podcast, some others. So if there's any listeners out there who are doing podcasts or have ways to connect me, that'd be great. But also to connect with basically 1,000 veterans a year, I'm working to assemble a team of like-minded veterans who see this cause as something to partner with. Veterans, who had leadership in the military and looking for a meaningful way that they haven't found in the civilian role to step in and also add that camaraderie piece of fellow veterans serving and supporting. There's a huge benefit and health need out there. I'm not sure if you've heard and seen the amount of mental health issues and suicides with veterans. It's estimated 17 to 22 veterans per day take their lives. That's 6,000 a year. And I'm not a mental health person, but there's a strong connection with physical health and mental health. So, the American Legion has the Be the One campaign. VFW's working with several other organizations to help address this. So, I see what I'm doing is helping by providing the physical side to reach mental health. Stress, anxiety, there's a physical and health component to that.
There is. Everything's tied together, from physical, mental, spiritual, the relationships you have, your purpose in life. All of these things are tied together. And if you can tackle each one of those elements, I think that's gonna help reduce those numbers of suicide and mental health issues. I think we're gonna have a lot more success in that area because of people like you that are going out of their way to help veterans that need that support. And so you're helping veterans and civilians in general. You're not only focusing on veterans. Is that correct?
Correct.
That's
That's
right.
my
So,
focus. But if anybody says, "Hey, I could use what you have," well,
yep, I'm with you. Same for me. It's my focus as well. I focus on veterans, but I'll help anybody that I can help. That's the goal. Or like you, will send you to somebody else that can help you with your particular issue. So,
exactly.
well, and so the last question, Kevin, if you were able to go back in time to a moment in your life where you needed some advice, where would you go and what would you tell yourself?
Good question. So, where would I go? You know, that's where your tribe is so important, you know, and having people around you or, in your sphere of influence that you can trust, that have walked before you, that you can talk to. Because, it doesn't matter what our age is, there's always something that's going to come up where you're looking for advice. There's a cross in the road. You're at a fork in the road, and what decision should you make? And sometimes we can make those decisions on our own, based on our knowledge, experience, education, what we've done in the past. But sometimes just being able to talk it through with someone who's walked the path will, ask some questions that get you to think differently. And so, where would I go? Trusted advisors, people that I have in my life who I know love and care for me and want the best for me, that will give me good advice and not just, something that benefits them. And um, so,
Trusted advisors, they've got a lot of experience. They're in that position for a reason. So I agree with you, and I'm glad that you and I are part of the same tribe, that we can lean on one another as we continue on through our respective journeys. So, Kevin, I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with me today and to share with the world what you're doing to help people, to help veterans. I hope everybody was able to get something out of this, and I hope you reach out to Kevin if you're looking for support for better health. At again, that's Lighthouse Health, and we will make sure to have all the resources and links in the show notes, so you can find Kevin.
all right. Well, thank you, Nick. Appreciate it. And appreciate the opportunity to be on your show, and looking forward to continued connections and relationship.
Absolutely. As we conclude this episode of Amplify Veterans, I want to emphasize the importance of supporting our veterans in times of need. If you or someone you know is struggling, remember, help is always available. The Veterans Crisis Line provides confidential support 24/7. Reach out to them by dialing 988 and then select option 1. You can also go to veteranscrisisline.net for more information.